Based on last month's episode of Brookline Look, in which a young Chinese man shared his dramatic experience growing up adopted, this month takes a different point of view, with heartwarming success stories from adoptive parents and a grown adopted Chinese woman. In addition, a very special Chinese adoption agency shares important information on the adoption process and raising adopted children. For Mark and Lee, the process of becoming a parent through adoption was a deeply conscientious and soulful journey. This journey consisted of many emotional and rewarding transitions.
That was my favorite part.
Before they cried? The IEs, the nannies, came in one at a time. Did the orphanage director come in first? I don't remember if he was
No, I think that the babies came in first. The orphanage director
came in last. And the IEs each were carrying one girl, one child, each carrying them face forward like this, right? Right?
So she was.
Except she was 20 months old at the time, so much littler, right?
I remember this one was, eyes were just so right there, just so focused, so I know something's going on. And she was saying, I mean, if she could talk, I know something's going on. I don't know what it is, but there's something going on in this room. Mm-hmm. And she was very present, very mm-hmm. present. And of course, then when her name was called,
and the IE handed her to me.
To you, right?
Mm-hmm. She started screaming, and then all the other babies started screaming. So I was crying.
She started crying first.
And
she cried first. Oh, absolutely.
And August.
And did you feel unprepared for that, or people said to you?
Oh no. I absolutely expected. Pretty soon. Did I expect that you were going to cry? Did I know you were going to cry? Did you know you were going to cry?
No.
No.
So we got an email. We got a phone call from my sister mm-hmm. saying that my father had died, mm-hmm. and that was 4 days after we had gotten Michelle. So we called our agency back in Boston mm-hmm. and said, okay, even with the 12-hour time difference, we need to come home early
right.
for the and that was where where Lillian had said, I hear that Michelle is crying more than any other baby.
Mm-hmm. So she knew already what was going on.
So she knew that Michelle was crying more than anybody.
Suddenly you come into fatherhood and you lose a father.
Well, that is very deep. One generation passes as another one comes back. It made me appreciate my father more, and it made more obvious the connections between my father and my daughter. My father would say, you don't understand what it is for a father, how a father feels about a child. Mm. When I was a child, and I would kind of slough my father off, and he would say, you don't know how I feel about you. And he was right, but now I do. Mm-hmm. So we flew back to Boston, and then a day or two later we flew to Philadelphia for the funeral, mm-hmm. and I felt it was like really like the first time I ever cried for my father. Mm-hmm. That my father would never meet his granddaughter, mm-hmm. and it was actually a very profound kind of experience, mm-hmm. but also so right, mm-hmm. exactly mm-hmm. what was supposed to happen.
When did you begin telling her that you were
pretty early on? We always talk about that. Michelle didn't grow in our tummies, in my tummy, but she grew in our hearts. Mm-hmm. Right. What else?
What else did we tell you?
What do you know?
You don't have to say anything if you don't want to.
Well, can I tell about what you told Toma's mom?
Just Toma.
At your school? Can I tell that story? We had a parents' night at Michelle's daycare, and one of the moms came up to me, and she was very pregnant, and she said, when I came to visit with my son, Toma, Michelle came up to me and said, do you have a baby growing in your tummy? And Toma's mom said,
yeah.
And then what did you say?
I don't remember.
You said, she said something like, did you grow in your mommy's tummy? And you said, I grew in my China mommy's tummy.
So you know. You know where you came from.
Well, I think that part of it is we were very fortunate with our travel group. We have an extended family.
Mm-hmm.
We are extended family. They were not, you know, when I think I saw people at dinner the day that Mark's father had died, and I had Michelle, and I went in and sat down with them and said, you know, I started crying and said Mark's dad had died, and they just said, well, we're your family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Michelle is now 5 years old, very loved, well-adjusted, and connected with her parents and her past. Mark and Lee believe that their deep love for Michelle and her physical and personality similarities come from the spiritual journey they've had through adopting. Margaret is a first-time mother and, like Michelle, was adopted from China as a small girl by an American Caucasian family whose love was also boundless. Margaret's realization of her identity as an adopted Asian child was positive, but also a private issue.
In the 60s, I was packed a little suitcase, put in a little red suit, and sent with the stewardesses over on the airplane. So they met me at the JFK airport. And the story goes that my brothers and sisters went tearing down the lobby to meet the group, and they passed me by and said, "Oh, isn't she cute?" And they went running on. And then, you know, they found out I was their little sister. I grew up knowing. I mean, first of all, I'm physically different than my siblings. And it was just a natural fact. You know, Moi Moi, which they decided to nickname me. My real name is Margaret. I was the adopted one. So it wasn't, there's never a time when I discovered or found out.
Did you have questions? Did you remember asking your parents about who you were?
No, I always considered that a very private thing.
For yourself?
Yeah.
And did they approach you and say, you know,
They
Margaret,
never
I want to
did.
tell
My
you a
parents,
story?
no. In fact, there was a letter my mother had saved. When I first came from the orphanage, I came over on a plane accompanied by the stewardesses, and in the suitcase was a letter from my godmother, who was a nun at the orphanage. And it wrote a little something about my real mother and my grandmother. And my mother saved that letter for years. She saved it until I guess when I became curious. And I never asked her. I became curious years before I even said anything to her. So when I finally said something to my mother, she just got up from the table, went to her files, came back and gave me the letter. I was shocked.
And how old were you?
I can't even remember that. I had to have been 11, 12.
Did you have some challenging times?
Being adopted or
yeah,
being a different race?
Yeah, well, both. Tell me.
Most of the challenging times were being a different race.
From your family or from the community?
From the community. And I used to hate walking by groups, especially of little boys, because they can be really mean.
Right.
And so I would cross the street. I would dread walking by groups of little boys, and because they would always make fun of me.
Right.
My father even remembers the time. He said he used to get angry, and I never realized that he took notice about this, that no boys ever asked me out, but he thinks there were some that were interested in me but were just afraid to ask me out, and he said he would get mad or annoyed about it, but I didn't even think he took notice of it.
Really good. Did he ever say, so did your parents ever deal with that and say, you know, Margaret, do you have a boyfriend? Did you talk about
No, my parents are very respect your privacy. You could leave an open letter there and they would never read it. So they don't interfere. It's not that they don't want to know, but they don't want to pry either.
And you appreciated that?
Yes. Yeah, there were times, yeah. But I'm sure if they'd gotten me to talk about it, I would have talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't know I could talk about it when I was little.
Right, right.
I can only remember one, my older sister Mary, and it wasn't about being adopted, it was about being Chinese. And my neighbor who lived in back of me met me with another friend, and who's actually, I used to play with her, but when when I bumped into her, she was with another friend and showing off, and she started calling me Chink and everything. I was so upset. I remember pulling my little sister home in the wagon and crying. And when I reached the house, my sister was there with all her friends. She was in 8th grade, and they asked me what happened. I said, Edie, Becky. I shouldn't say anything. You know, Edie made fun of me, and they just went chasing after her, and they yelled at her. And that's the only time I can ever remember someone making fun of me.
And your siblings stepping in.
Yeah. But my brother Owen, too, was, we went to college together. People would ask him questions. And he would just say, it's just my little sister. You know, she's not different.
So you heard your siblings and you watched them defend you.
Yes.
And make it
Very
also a very
protective,
a normal situation for you. She's adopted.
Very defensive, yeah.
Yeah.
Although Margaret's Chinese identity was not fulfilled as a child, she has only the strongest love for her family, which has overcome any negative challenges. She feels bonded for life and indebted to her family for who she is today. The following adoption agency provides helpful suggestions for parents and children who may encounter challenges related to their adoption experience.
It's very important that families know the qualifications to adopt from China before they start. That's very important, and families must meet the qualifications to be able to adopt from China. The qualifications are for China that the family is over the age of 30 and at least one spouse is under the age of 55. That's the requirement with regard to age, is older than 30 and at least one being under 55 years of age. In terms of the age of the child, the age of the family does matter, and China looks at the female's age. Females under the age of 45 are eligible for an infant from China, and that's 6 to 12 months of age. So it's very important for families to be aware of that and to feel comfortable with the age range of 6 to 12 months. That's really important. Another qualification to adopt from China is no serious medical history, no serious criminal history. So it's a little bit of a gray area. There's no black and white as to what's serious. So that's important. We want to make sure there's been nothing recent and nothing major. One of the things that we recommend is that families speak with us before they even get started if there's anything that might be of a concern, so that we can make sure that that's going to be acceptable by the CCAA in China. Some of the other qualifications with regard to income. The regulations for China for a single applicant is $30,000, and for a couple it's $40,000. So that's their regulation. And then certainly an approved home study and an approval from the INS. Those are the main qualifications to adopt from China. And also one of our main goals is to assist families in networking with other families. So important is to meet other families who are going through the same process. Not only is it important for the families, it's important for these children and for them to be connected with other children who've been adopted from China. It's also very important to understand some of the issues that children will face as they grow older. And one of the things that we talk about during the home study process is how to talk about adoption with these children. And we feel very strongly that the day that she comes home, the day they're placed with her, to start using the word adoption. So children are comfortable with it, families are comfortable with it. It's a great word, and so when children hear that word, they feel good about it. So we say talk about it from day one. Use the word adoption. We also talk about the way you use the word adoption and the tense that families use it. We always want families to use it in the past tense. You were adopted, when you were adopted in China is a good example, versus my adopted child, which is using the word adoption as more of an adjective, as a label to this child. So always using it as a past tense. It's not something that's present. We adopted her. So that's important, and it's really interesting to learn how people use adoption-related language, and so we talk a lot about that. Another really big issue that we talk about is how others will respond to families who have adopted from China. It's very apparent with our families that they have a child that was adopted, because certainly children from China look different than the majority of our Caucasian families. And the research that's out there now really emphasizes talking about adoption, not keeping it a secret. We've come a long way in the last 20 to 30 years with the issue of adoption. And again, the fact that we live in a state where it is so common, it does make a difference, and it is certainly helpful for families and for these children. I think one of the very positive things about an international adoption, and especially with a country like China where it has increased, is the fact that these children will have other children who have been adopted from China. And it's very interesting to see how families stay very, very close after the trip to China, which is great, because it's interesting to think that these little girls will have had a longer relationship with each other if they're from the same orphanage than with their families. So that's so important that they do bond and they do stick together, because they're all going to be facing some of these issues, and it's nice to have that support from others.
Brookline Look, and this month is sponsored by China Adoption with Love.